I never imagined that learning about investments would drag me straight into a family war. For months, I attended late-night webinars, took handwritten notes, met with a retired financial analyst, and quietly joined an investment group filled with people half my age. I didn't brag. I didn't announce it. I wanted to build something for myself, quietly, privately, and with dignity. But at Thanksgiving dinner, while everyone passed dishes around the table, my daughter-in-law Rena let out a sharp laugh. "Don't you think it's too late to be playing with investments?" she said loudly enough for the entire table to freeze. Some guests tried to hide their smiles. My son stayed silent. I lowered my eyes, swallowed my embarrassment, and kept eating. What Rena didn't know was that the opportunity of a lifetime was already in motion. And within hours, the news broadcast would shatter her arrogance and reveal the truth I had kept hidden for months. My name is Clara Mendel. I'm 60 years old, and I walked into Thanksgiving dinner that evening with a quiet sense of accomplishment I hadn't felt in years. For months, I had joined an investment group filled with people decades younger than me, stayed up late, studying charts, balancing numbers, and learning things I once believed were beyond my age. I felt proud, nervous, but proud. When Rena, my daughter-in-law, asked how I'd been spending my time, I smiled and told her I started investing. Before I could finish, she let out a sharp, dismissive laugh that echoed across the table. "Investing at your age?" she said loudly. The room froze. My smile faltered, but I forced myself to hold steady as embarrassment washed over me. Rena didn't stop with one comment. She kept going like she had an audience waiting for her jokes. "I mean, Clara, isn't it a little late to start playing with money?" she added with exaggerated disbelief, waving her fork in the air as if she were delivering a comedy routine. A few people chuckled nervously, unsure whether to encourage her or pretend they hadn't heard. I felt heat crawl up my neck, but I stayed silent, gripping the edge of my napkin. My son Aaron shifted in his seat, but said nothing, his eyes glued to his plate. Rena watched me expectantly, waiting for me to defend myself, to argue, to give her more material. Instead, I lowered my gaze and continued eating, refusing to let her see how deeply her mockery cut. The atmosphere shifted instantly after Rena's jab. The previously warm, laughter-filled room now felt tight with awkward tension. Guests exchanged hesitant glances, unsure whether to comfort me or avoid getting involved. Aaron's aunt cleared her throat loudly, changing the subject to the cranberry sauce, but it didn't work. Everyone had already heard the insult, and pretending otherwise only made the silence heavier. I could feel eyes flick toward me, then dart away, as if my embarrassment might be contagious. Even the soft background music seemed to fade. I pushed a green bean around my plate, reminding myself that staying quiet was my strength, not my weakness. Rena, however, seemed energized by the discomfort she caused, leaning back smugly as if she had won some invisible competition only she was playing. I tried to focus on my food, chewing slowly so no one would see my throat tighten. It wasn't the insult itself, it was the way she said it, loud enough to make sure the sting hit as many people as possible. I glanced toward the kitchen doorway, pretending to look for something, just to escape the eyes around me. My hand shook slightly as I reached for my water glass, and I forced a steady breath. For years, I had been the quiet one in the family, the peacekeeper, the woman who never snapped back no matter how sharp the comment. But this time felt different. Something inside me hardened. I didn't speak, but I decided right then that Rena would never talk down to me again. As if nothing had happened, Rena launched into a speech about her company, how quickly it was growing, how the right business mind was essential for success, and how she wished more people understood modern finance. Her voice dripped with superiority, each sentence a reminder of the gap she believed existed between us. She bragged about her upcoming expansion, her recent investors, and how young entrepreneurs like her were the future of the market.
Every few seconds, she'd glance at me with a thin, triumphant smile, as if daring me to challenge her expertise. I remained silent, but inside, I felt the spark of something new, a quiet confidence fueled not by revenge, but by knowledge she had no idea I possessed.
Aaron finally looked up, and for a moment, our eyes met. His expression held a mix of discomfort and guilt, but he still didn't speak up. I couldn't tell whether he agreed with Rena or just feared her reaction. Either way, his silence was its own sting. He kept cutting his turkey into tiny pieces, avoiding eye contact with both of us. Meanwhile, Rena continued her monologue about quarterly returns and projected valuations, as if she were addressing a business conference rather than a family dinner. I realized then that Aaron had grown used to letting her control every conversation. I felt a deep sadness, not just for myself, but for the son I raised, now too timid to defend his own mother in a room full of people. Just as Rena started another boast about a potential acquisition deal her company was preparing for, the TV in the living room suddenly cut to breaking news. The anchor's voice filled the dining room, crisp and urgent. A major acquisition has just taken place involving one of the region's fastest-growing companies. Everyone turned their heads. The company name that followed wiped the smug smile off Rena's face instantly. Her fork slipped from her hand, clattering onto her plate. The anchor continued, revealing that the company had been bought by an anonymous investor group led by a single woman. I felt my heart beat thunder as the screen flashed the name I had kept hidden for months. And at that exact moment, Rena finally fell silent. Clara often reflected on how her journey had truly begun long before Rena's mockery. For months, she spent late nights at her small dining table, surrounded by highlighters, notebooks, and investment podcasts playing softly in the background. She pushed herself to understand concepts that once felt impossible, rewriting terms until they became familiar. Sometimes she doubted herself, wondering if she was being foolish. But each new insight made her feel alive again. She remembered promising herself that retirement wouldn't mean the end of purpose, and every page she studied was proof she wasn't done growing. Those quiet nights built the confidence she needed for what was coming, something far bigger than she ever imagined. When Clara finally gathered the courage to join an investment group, she felt like she was stepping into another world. The room was filled with people of different ages, but she was easily the oldest, which made her feel exposed. However, the warm welcome from the members surprised her, especially when they admired her determination. They encouraged her questions, shared experiences, and treated her as an equal rather than a curiosity. Slowly, Clara began to find her voice, participating in discussions with growing confidence. Each session expanded her understanding and sharpened her instincts. Though she never said it aloud, joining that group became one of the most empowering decisions of her life. Clara's journey shifted the day she met Leonard Hale, a calm, sharp-minded investor known for turning struggling businesses into success stories. He noticed her taking extensive notes and approached her after a meeting, offering guidance if she wanted it. Clara hesitated, unsure she deserved a mentor like him, but Leonard insisted that passion mattered more than age. Over time, he taught her not just numbers, but strategy, how to read people, predict patterns, and recognize opportunities hidden in chaos. He treated her with respect, challenging her to think boldly. Under Leonard's mentorship, Clara's confidence grew, and she slowly transformed from a hesitant beginner into someone capable of making decisions with purpose and precision. With Leonard's guidance, Clara dove into researching companies that were struggling but still held potential. She spent hours analyzing reports, comparing trends, and examining leadership histories. It felt like solving a giant puzzle, each piece revealing something new about the business world. Some nights she barely slept, driven by an excitement she hadn't felt in years. Leonard often reviewed her findings, impressed by her growing intuition and thoroughness. Clara began to enjoy the hunt, the thrill of discovering hidden value where others saw failure. She didn't realize it yet, but all this research was quietly steering her toward a company she knew far too well, Rena's pride and joy. Clara's heart sunk the moment she recognized the name on a failing company report, Rena's software startup. She hadn't intended to look into it, but the more she read, the more concerned she became. The company was drowning in internal mismanagement, inflated valuations, and poor leadership decisions. Clara felt torn, unsure if she should continue reading, yet unable to stop.
Shockingly, many issues stemmed from Rena's own
decisions, careless spending, ignored warnings, and arrogant shortcuts. Leonard noticed her reaction and gently reminded her that emotions shouldn't interfere with analysis. Clara nodded, reminding herself this wasn't about revenge. It was about truth, opportunity, and the reality that business didn't bend for personal relationships. When Clara quietly presented her findings to the investment group, the room shifted. Members leaned forward, recognizing the signs of a company ripe for acquisition. They praised her research, impressed by how precisely she'd identified vulnerabilities and potential recovery routes. Leonard guided the discussion, asking Clara to explain why the business was failing and how it could be saved. Speaking clearly and confidently, she laid out solutions that surprised even her. The group realized the company could become profitable under new leadership, and conversations quickly moved toward forming a strategy. Clara felt a mix of pride and fear, knowing the situation was becoming real and personal. Within weeks, the investment group worked nonstop to finalize the acquisition plan. Clara found herself at the center of every meeting, her research guiding major decisions. Lawyers drafted contracts, analysts double-checked numbers, and Leonard made sure everything was airtight. Clara couldn't believe how quickly things had advanced. The company she'd once thought untouchable was now within her reach. She stayed focused, refusing to let personal emotions cloud her judgment. To her surprise, the group decided she should be one of the primary owners, given her pivotal role in discovering the opportunity. By the time the plan was complete, Clara realized her life was about to change in ways even Rena would never see coming. Thanksgiving dinner was halfway through when the TV program abruptly cut to breaking news. The anchor's voice
Carried across the dining room, announcing that a local tech company had been fully acquired by a private investment group. Clara's fork paused midair as the company name flashed across the screen, Rena's company, the one she had mocked everyone for not understanding. Guests fell silent as numbers scrolled in bold. The acquisition was worth millions, shocking even the business commentators. Clara watched quietly, feeling a storm building in the room. She knew this moment was coming, but she didn't expect the reveal to happen right here, in front of the entire family, and certainly not this loudly. The moment the anchor said the company's name, the entire dining table froze. Conversations died mid-sentence. Rena's mother's hand trembled around her glass, and even the kids looked up from their plates, sensing something serious had shifted. Clara sat still, letting the silence spread while everyone processed what the news meant. Rena's husband blinked repeatedly, as if he couldn't believe what he'd heard. The rest of the family exchanged confused glances, whispering among themselves. Clara kept her expression neutral, but inside she felt a mix of nerves and quiet satisfaction. For months she had been preparing for this moment, and the sudden stillness in the room proved everything was unfolding exactly as expected. Rena's confidence shattered the moment the camera switched to an image of her company's building, with the headline, "Under New Ownership." Her face drained of color, and her fork clattered onto her plate. She stared at the screen in disbelief, her jaw tightening as the reporter explained the company had been bought due to financial instability and leadership failures. Every word hit her like a blow. It was the first time the family had ever seen Rena speechless, truly speechless. Her pride, the same pride she weaponized to mock Clara earlier, had suddenly turned into humiliation. Rena tried to swallow, but her throat tightened. It was clear she finally understood something was very, very wrong. The room went from stunned silence to heavy tension when Rena looked at Clara and whispered, "Did you know about this?" Clara gently placed her napkin down, met her daughter-in-law's fearful eyes, and spoke calmly. "Yes, I'm one of the owners now." The words seemed to echo through the room, making several relatives gasp aloud. Rena blinked rapidly, shaking her head as if trying to wake from a nightmare. She couldn't comprehend how the woman she'd mocked for having a small investment now controlled the company she bragged about every chance she got. Clara didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her quiet confirmation was louder than any revenge speech. Barely minutes after the news broke, Rena's father, a stern businessman who had always treated Clara with polite distance, suddenly stood up and walked over to her. His tone, once formal and slightly dismissive, had transformed into deep respect. "Clara," he said softly, "may I speak with you?" The room watched as he thanked her for handling the acquisition so professionally and expressed genuine admiration for the work she had done. Even he had never expected Rena's company to be taken over so swiftly. Clara nodded gracefully, answering his questions with clarity and humility. For the first time, the power dynamic had shifted completely, and everyone could feel it.
With the family hanging on every word, Clara calmly explained her months of studying, the investment group meetings, Leonard's mentorship, and the careful research that exposed the company's weaknesses. She described the acquisition process step by step, not to boast, but to clear the confusion and show the intention behind it. She made it clear this wasn't a personal attack, but a business opportunity her team couldn't ignore. Rena listened with trembling hands, realizing just how much effort Clara had put into something she had laughed at. Clara's voice remained steady, measured, composed, and undeniably confident. Every detail she shared dismantled another layer of doubt within the room. As Clara finished explaining, Rena finally understood the full magnitude of what had happened. Her company, the one she flaunted endlessly, was no longer hers. Her position, her authority, her pride, all stripped away in a single evening. She sank back into her chair, eyes unfocused as the truth settled heavily on her shoulders. The mocking words she had thrown at Clara earlier replayed in her mind, now sounding painfully foolish. For the first time, she realized the consequences of her arrogance. And worse, she knew the next steps were out of her control. Clara hadn't humiliated her. Rena had humiliated herself. The official notice of leadership restructuring was released early the next morning, and by noon, Rena's access to systems had already been revoked. Her email login failed, her office badge stopped working, and her team received a memo stating she was no longer part of the management. Rena stood outside the building in disbelief, staring at the security guard who gently informed her she needed to leave. The fall from power was devastating. Just hours ago, she'd proudly worn the title of CEO, and now she was simply an ex-employee with no authority. The speed of her removal stunned her, but to Clara, it was simply business moving forward, nothing more.
Nothing less. News spread quickly in the corporate world, and Rena's social circle reacted exactly as Clara had predicted. Former friends who once praised her success now disappeared overnight, distancing themselves from the downfall they didn't want to be associated with. Her phone, once buzzing with constant messages, went silent. Invitations vanished. Even her closest business allies stopped returning calls. Rena realized painfully how shallow her connections were, none rooted in loyalty, only in status. The humiliation deepened as she understood she had built her life on admiration rather than genuine relationships. Watching her panic from a distance, Clara felt no satisfaction, only the quiet reminder that arrogance often leaves people standing alone when they need support the most. Aaron arrived at Clara's home later that week, looking exhausted and weighed down by guilt. He admitted he had known Rena could be dismissive, but he never imagined she would openly belittle Clara in front of the family. He apologized for not defending her sooner, for letting things escalate to this point, and for underestimating her abilities. Clara listened patiently, appreciating his sincerity, but not letting him escape accountability. She reminded him that respect shouldn't depend on success or failure. It should have been given long before the acquisition. Aaron nodded, ashamed, yet grateful for her honesty. It was the first genuine conversation they'd had in years, and it marked a quiet turning point between them. Clara stood in the sleek conference room surrounded by the new board members who had been reviewing plans for stabilizing the company. Despite her nerves, she carried herself with calm confidence. Leonard introduced her as a key figure whose insight had shaped the acquisition strategy, prompting the board to greet her warmly. Clara spoke clearly about restructuring goals, employee retention, and financial recovery paths. The board listened with respect, impressed by her precision and dedication. In that moment, Clara realized she was no longer just a beginner, she was a leader. The room felt welcoming, and for the first time, she truly belonged in a space she once thought was beyond her reach. Later that afternoon, Rena called Clara, her voice shaky and desperate. She begged for an explanation, insisting she needed to know how everything had collapsed so quickly. Clara remained calm, explaining that the acquisition was simply the result of failing leadership and unsustainable decisions, facts Rena had ignored for too long. Rena tried to shift the blame, but Clara didn't waver. She refused to sugarcoat the truth, gently reminding her that business doesn't reward arrogance or shortcuts. Rena's tears on the other end of the line revealed just how unprepared she was to face the consequences. For the first time, Clara wasn't the one feeling small. Rena was. After the emotional call, Clara finally decided it was time to establish boundaries that should have been in place long ago. She met with Rena and Aaron together, maintaining a calm but firm demeanor. She made it clear she no longer accepted disrespect, subtle mockery, or dismissive behavior from anyone in the family. Clara wasn't looking for revenge.
She was reclaiming her dignity. Rena nodded silently, unable to argue, while Aaron agreed wholeheartedly. Clara left the conversation with a sense of peace. For the first time in years, she felt truly in control of her own narrative.
Longer overshadowed or underestimated. The company's first board meeting under new ownership marked a defining moment for Clara. She entered the room with her notes prepared, her confidence grounded in months of effort. The board discussed budgets, marketing strategies, and recovery plans, and Clara contributed with clarity and strategic insight. She wasn't just participating, she was shaping direction. Leonard watched proudly as she handled complex discussions with ease. When the meeting ended, the board members applauded her contributions, acknowledging her as an essential force in the company's future. Walking out of the room, Clara felt a deep sense of accomplishment. She had earned her place, not through luck, but through perseverance and undeniable competence. Don't go anywhere. What happens next turns Clara's entire story upside down. And if you don't want to miss the final twist, make sure you subscribe before we move on.
Clara walked into the headquarters with a renewed sense of purpose. She met with the restructuring team to oversee the company's transformation from the inside out. Instead of focusing solely on profit, she insisted on building a workplace where innovation and employee growth mattered. She prioritized departments that had been ignored under Rena's leadership and invested in training programs that encouraged creativity. Her decisions surprised the board, who saw immediate improvement in morale. Clara wasn't trying to erase the past. She was creating a stronger future. For the first time, the company felt stable, hopeful, and ready for genuine progress. And Clara stood at the center of it all, quietly reshaping everything. Clara held a private meeting with several employees who had resigned or been pushed out during Rena's harsh management era. Many returned with hesitation, unsure whether the new leadership would actually treat them differently. Clara listened to each story carefully, apologizing on behalf of the company and offering them reinstated positions with improved terms. Some cried, others simply nodded in relief. Clara didn't just bring them back, she gave them the respect they had been denied. Seeing the hope in their faces reaffirmed her determination to lead with integrity. The atmosphere in the company shifted as people whispered about the new era under Clara's guidance. Rena's fall forced
Her into a world she had never experienced: rejection. She sent out dozens of resumes, but her reputation followed her everywhere. Former partners refused to vouch for her, and companies didn't want a leader associated with mismanagement. For the first time, she considered taking an entry-level job just to stay afloat. As she scrolled through listings late at night, she realized how little she had built outside her ego. The silence around her felt suffocating. She finally understood that titles meant nothing without humility or character. It was a painful awakening, but necessary if she ever wanted a second chance. Aaron spent days reflecting on how deeply his mother had been hurt over the years. He realized he hadn't just failed to protect her, he had allowed Rena's dismissiveness to shape their home. He visited Clara again, not with excuses, but with genuine remorse. He confessed that he had been blinded by pride, too eager to support his wife and too afraid to confront her behavior. Clara listened silently, then placed a hand on his shoulder, telling him that accountability mattered more than perfection. It was a tender but heavy moment, marking the beginning of a healthier, more honest relationship between them. A month later, the city's business council invited Clara to an awards ceremony celebrating leaders who had made meaningful contributions to local industries. Clara hadn't expected recognition. She simply did what she believed was right. But standing on stage, holding the award, she felt the weight of her journey. From being mocked in her own home to becoming a symbol of resilience and wisdom. The audience applauded as she gave a short, heartfelt speech of
starting over at any age. It wasn't fame she felt that night. It was validation, the kind born from perseverance and integrity. One quiet evening, Clara walked through the company's renovated workspace, observing how far everything had come. Employees laughed in the break room, new ideas filled the whiteboards, and the tension that once hung in the air had been replaced by hopeful energy. Clara stepped into her office, glancing at the framed certificate from the investment group and the award she had recently received. She sat down, reflecting on the path that brought her here. Every insult, every doubt, every silent tear had built her strength. She realized she no longer lived in the shadow of others' opinions. She had created a life defined by her own courage. Clara's journey reached a quiet but powerful resolution when she finalized her long-term plans for the company. She structured programs to ensure fairness, growth, and opportunity, regardless of age or background. She arranged scholarships, mentorship roles, and financial literacy workshops, initiatives she wished she had access to years ago. The company wasn't just recovering, it was evolving into something meaningful. As Clara locked her office for the night, she felt a deep, peaceful certainty. She had risen above humiliation, proven her worth without shouting, and turned her resilience into impact. This wasn't revenge, it was legacy, and it belonged entirely to her.